What's up everybody, Pete here from the Sunday Drive, and today we're working on my 2004 Silverado Cat Eye, and we're changing the transmission filter and putting in some new fluid. So like I said, today we are changing the fluid and filter on my transmission. I have a 4L60e in my 2004 Silverado. Now the process that we're gonna be doing today is pretty much the same for all GM vehicles and most automatic transmission vehicles, at least if it's rear-wheel drive. If you wanna know how to do more in-depth fluid flushes, we have a video on that, but that's on a 2014 Silverado. The process, once again, is very similar, so you can check that video out if you're interested. While we're in there, we're gonna be changing some shift solenoids and a torque converter pulse width modulation valve. So we're gonna have all that stuff in the next video, but for this one, we're just gonna show you how to drop the pan, change the filter, and put new fluid in. And if you're wondering what kind of fluid we use on our trucks or vehicles, we're using AMSOIL. This is ATF fluid, fuel efficient version with the blue cap. And you can use our referral code. We don't get any kickback for it, but feel free to put that in if you feel like ordering some AMSOIL for yourself. So we're under the truck right now. The camera is facing the back of the truck, and this shift linkage is on the driver's side. We need to remove this, or at least disconnect it and get it out of the way so that we can drop the pan. So just pry this out with the screwdriver. Wiggle this out. And then come back here and then pop this clip out, which is holding the shift linkage into this bracket. And that one just slides out. So this kind of looks like a staple. And next, just push in on the tabs on each side of here to pull this out. Now, once this is out of the way, this bracket will be in the way in the future, but it will bend out a little bit with a pry bar. We can start removing these 16 bolts around the perimeter of the pan. Next, you'll want to remove the 3 nuts holding the exhaust to the manifold, and that'll give us a little bit of wiggle room. We're also going to remove the exhaust hanger near the back of the truck, and that'll allow us to pull down on the exhaust and get enough clearance to pull the pan out. So here's the nuts that you need to remove. There's 3 15 millimeters holding the exhaust to the manifold. You can also remove the driver's side, but we broke 2 swivel head extensions trying to get to one of them, so we gave up. And we found out that you really don't need to do it anyway. So if you want a little bit more flexibility, go ahead and remove that driver's side. Otherwise, you can get by with just the passenger side. Now take a 13 millimeter socket and start these bolts by hand. Don't loosen them all the way. Just make sure that they all want to spin. That's the first part of the challenge, is making sure none of the bolts have rusted into place. So we've got a very tall catch can that we're using. It's very helpful when we have trucks and vehicles up on the lift because you don't have to let the fluid drop 6 feet into a pan. So I'm gonna get this close enough. We're gonna try and drain the pan from the front. Now we're gonna loosen the bolts in the back, but not take them all the way out because we don't want the pan to just fall. And we wanna kinda control where the fluid goes. We just gotta pry it away carefully without making a mess. It is up there pretty good. All right, so I've broken the seal. I'm gonna let it drain a little bit. Now be careful using a screwdriver. Obviously I needed to use it to pry, but you don't wanna pry too hard. You can bend the pan, you can crack it, or you could just scratch one of the surfaces and it'll never seal right again. So be very careful if you have to use something metal to pry the pan away. I don't want to let go of this completely because there's a lot of weight on the back of the pan right now. So we got Cliff holding up the front of the pan. I'm holding up the back. Now we're going to slowly drop this pan. So now to drop the pan, we actually need to pry back on this bracket that was holding the shift linkage in, and that will allow us to release the pan. So go ahead and stick a pry bar up between here. This way you can pull the bracket back towards the drive shaft and get clearance on the driver's side, and then you're going to pull down on the exhaust system on the passenger side to get clearance over there. We use the fluid pump to pump the fluid out of this pan, so that way we're not going to have anything spilling on us when we try to take this out. Now when I'm pulling down on this exhaust, that's because it's on the lift and it's like hard to get anything to pull down. But on the 2014 Silverado video, we came up with a contraption with a jack, a piece of wood, and like a strap or a chain, and you can use that to pull down on the exhaust as well and get the clearance you need. So check that out. It'll be in the link in the corner. That's really helpful if you're doing this job on the ground. So Cliff is pulling the bracket away on the driver's side, and I'm pulling down on the exhaust, and there we go, it's out. Now some people don't like to pry on that bracket on the shifter linkage. It did bend it a little bit. We're gonna have to try and bend it back, but the other alternative is getting to the bolts on the top, which is really hard to do. Now we can remove the filter. Just go ahead and get behind it, wiggle it out. The front is where it goes into the transmission, so that's where you want to apply the most downward force. And drain out whatever was left in the filter. So the first thing I'm going to do is check the magnet. Here is all the goop that was stuck to the magnet. So this is combined from metal shavings. It's pretty normal to find, so I wouldn't be too alarmed. Now we're going to focus on the gasket around the outside. This looks like it was actually was a pre-made gasket because it has this tab on it. Actually has a couple of tabs. So this looks like a pre-made gasket, but also it might have a mix of RTV and a gasket, which usually is recommended against, but it seems like that might be the case. So hopefully the actual gasket material isn't too hard to get off, but looks like it might be. Sheesh. As you can see, there's rust along the edge, so moisture must have been trapped there. So right now I'm applying gasket remover. This will really help to get off whatever's left from that last gasket. So what you do is you apply it and then you let it sit for like 15 minutes and then get back to scraping. All right, so I just let this stuff sit for a little bit and now I'm scraping it off with the razor blade. And be very careful with something sharp like a razor blade because it can score the surface. And that is the pan all cleaned up. If you look around the outer edges, there's a little bit of stuff left over, but all we really care about is the center where there's that lip and the inside. So it cleaned up pretty well. Took like 2 hours, but here we are. So let's get this installed. We're not going to be installing this gasket that came with the kit, but generally it is a good idea if you can. The main problem is it's kind of a pain to get out. So unless there's a glaring issue with the one that's already in the truck, you can probably reuse it. I'm gonna go ahead and take some fluid and put it around the outside of this and place it into the hole. So now we can start putting the bolts in. Now I'm using an impact gun, but it's on the very lowest setting, and I'm just gonna get it so that the bolt is touching the pan. Now go ahead and torque this down to spec. You want to torque the bolts down in the order shown on this diagram, but basically you're working from the inside out. Now we can reinstall this exhaust flange and the 3 nuts that hold it in place. And torque this down to spec. I'm going to reinstall this exhaust hanger now. Just like that. Now reinstall the shift cable. And don't forget the clip. Now find your transmission dipstick. On my truck, it is this red handled one. Pull that and pop it out. There is writing on this dipstick. It basically says to check the fluid level while it's in park, at idle, and the transmission's warm. Now we know we have to add fluid. Ideally, you would know exactly how much fluid you drained from the pan. Unfortunately, we did not do that. So what we're gonna do is put a couple quarts in, maybe 3 quarts, and then we're going to let the truck idle and warm up, and then we're gonna check the dipstick again to see how much fluid we need to add. At the very base of this dipstick, there is a cold mark. So when you're checking at temperature, there's these hatch marks. That's where the hot area is. But you wanna at least make sure that you're at the cold marks before starting and trying to drive the vehicle. So I just took the truck for a drive. It works great. The shifting feels like brand new, but now we need to check for the fluid level after it's warmed up. So you want to wipe it down. And it is bone dry. So we definitely need to add some fluid to this. So I just added the last quart from the first gallon. Now the challenge here is you just added fluid, so it's all along the filler neck. You gotta try and discern the difference between what's fluid that's went down the filler and what's actually the level. So judging by this, it looks like it's reading fluid almost at the hot mark, but I'm still not 100% sure. I'm gonna check it one more time. And it's dry. We put about 5 quarts in total, so let's go ahead and check the dipstick level. And that looks good. That's about the top third of the hatched section of the dipstick, so we should be good to go. So that's it. That is how you change the fluid and the filter on your 2004 Silverado or your 4L60e transmission vehicle. This will work the same for any SUVs that are equipped with these transmissions and most rear-wheel drive automatic transmissions. If you found this video to be helpful, please give us a big like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.